Hey, we're live. We are live. We are here. My name is Ken. I'm going to be your DM for this evening, your host. We are doing the metagaming series, and finally we get around to meeting the final member of the party, Mr. Richard. Welcome, sir.
How are we? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for being here by force. We had like a shotgun. We had like sent people to your house and stuff, but it was good. We got it. We got there.
That's the most important thing.
That's it, yeah. People are popping off in chat. They're fighting the boss. The prediction is done, so I will just end that for you. So, we're going to do our normal razzmatazz. We're going to do some questions, some Q&A, and as always, if you're in chat, you can indeed ask questions. Throw them down with an exclamation point, the word question, and then ask your question. Maybe a voice will read it, or maybe it'll be so quiet that I'll have to read it. We'll find out. We'll go through this together. And those who fought the boss in chat, thank you, Mr. Rory. Apparently you bet correctly and you got 5k points. Crazy. So, Mr. Richard, can you tell me a little bit about your background? Sort of like what brought you into, like D&D and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've always been a gamer, so I've always been PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, anything I can get my hands on, and as much of it as possible for years and years. That's the bread and butter. I mean, there's huge amount of crossover, RPG, shooter. I play absolutely everything. And then from there, a couple of years ago, I got into board games in a big way. I have a huge collection. I went to Essenspiel, which is a board game convention in Germany. I've got a load of collector's editions, Kickstarters, things like that. And I love a good dungeon crawl and those type of games and loot and so on.
Yeah. I put up a picture there of your collection. You have like this immense collection of just like board games galore.
And I will say that's an old picture, so I have a lot more than that. But
when the first time we kind of met, that was the thing. You like we talked in a chat privately. It was just you and I, but you had the camera on, and we were just talking about different games and different things for like an hour. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. So I've I really love all types of games, but particularly co-op. That's my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
Anything co-op, I'll turn my hand to it. So whether it's a video game, a board game, I mean, I'll play adversarial stuff as well, but by choice I prefer co-op. And obviously D&D is co-op storytelling. It's dungeon crawl, it's looting, it's everything I've always been interested in. I just didn't know where to start. Like most people, you have that barrier to entry, and it was actually Cian in the party who I was talking to, who mentioned that he was in a game, starting to play, just learning himself. One thing led to another, and now you're all stuck with me.
Is that how it works? Yeah, no, absolutely. It's but like it was a very quick thing because we were doing this kind of game for work, right? So it was just something that was there and present, and and I think Cian actually was the one who said like, "Can my friend join?" or whatever, and he was like, "Daddy DM, can my friend join?" And he made it sound really like coy and nice and sweet, and then you come in and you're playing like, Mr. Barbarian. What initially drew you in? I mean, you touched off it there, but what initially drew you into something like a TTRPG or even just D&D specifically? Like, what was it that had that pull for you?
I very much like to try new things. I mean, I love traveling, and one of the things I love about it is experiencing different culture, different food, etc. And you've all heard the trope about things like music. It's like food, you can't eat the same thing every day. Same with music, same with everything, video games, board games, whatever. Variety is the spice of life. So yeah, I like I said, I was interested already. I got a taste and then I was hooked.
It's the way it works. Yeah. You joined our campaign, which was just it was actually one that Cian had started because he was like, I want to try and get my hand into D&D and stuff. I eventually just railroaded it, took over, threw him out as DM. I took over. I was like, I'm DM of this. So it was Twisters and Wenches. Like that was your first sort of like bring into this. I know we're going to touch off some of those highlights in a little while because we have had questions.
Yeah.
Everybody who has talked about that game has been like, wait till you talk to Richard. It's been mentioned like a ton of times. Rory and Cian both were like highlighting this, but do you have any like sort of why don't you introduce Jugs? Let's start there. Let's talk about your main man himself.
So when I didn't fully understand the ins and outs of D&D when I was literally just hearing about it for the first time. Within a week or two, I was joining you guys on Discord, and within a couple of days I was making my first character, not knowing anything about the rules setup or anything, and just leaning on all my knowledge from board games, video games, rules, crossovers, all the different things, like having a fair understanding of generic classes and video games and so on, that they're similar. But I've always gravitated to, I suppose, meathead players, you know. If I played a beat 'em up, I always play the big guy. Like I said, co-op, I always play the tank, you know. When I played World of Warcraft, all that kind of stuff, I always play the tank, I always play the big guy, I always play the meat shield. So starting off, I just definitely wanted to stay in my comfort zone. It's something that I enjoy. I always liked the creativity that you can add to make your own version of stuff for D&D. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't understand that. Being able to put your stamp on something, it's amazing. And you can truly make it your own. So for me, I read a book many years ago which just popped into my head during character creation. I started off thinking about characters I like, things like, you know, Bane, or, you know, like I said, big meathead kind of guys that I thought would be cool.
Absolutely,
and the book that popped into my head was The Northern Lights. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, and if you're not, you know, a quick Google will fix you up there. The main thing is there's a polar bear who wears armor, can talk, etc. And when I read that, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So when I had an opportunity to make a character, that was my first request. Can we reskin whatever character class I play as a polar bear? And I decided to pick a class that had heavy armor to tie in an armored warbear. And from there, the pieces of the puzzle slowly started to come together. I have a weird thing about names. So, you know, going back to video games, every time you create an account on a PlayStation or Xbox, you have to come up with a name. Every time you create new email addresses, new everything, it's name. And then you're thinking about people have to see it, you have to use it, you have to stand over it. And I get kind of paralysis over that, where I don't know what to do with it. And I find it really hard to name something that I don't know yet because I don't understand it. So I have a tendency to go for short names, nicknames, something that's, you know, sits on top of their actual name. So in building the warbear, the armored warbear, my thought was Juggernaut, something huge, something massive, hulking, powerful. Not necessarily Juggernaut from X-Men, just what the word Juggernaut means, a behemoth, something massive. So from there,
you mean you
Juggernaut
didn't name them
born.
after the trucks from America, the big like Juggernaut trucks? You didn't name after that? Oh my god.
And then, you know, affectionately he became known as Jugs as the campaign went on, Jugs for short. And he did have a full name and a real name, which wasn't revealed until near the end of the campaign, which was, what, 2.5 years? So it was a long time coming. But that's the basics of where I started.
NPC in the end too. It wasn't even you who revealed it, right? It was an NPC who was just like, oh, by the way.
Yeah, 100%. There was some mystery, intrigue, a BBG, some murders, a blood trail, and a call out to a name. And that's kind of where it came from.
Absolutely. I mean, there's one specifically I want to hear about, but do you want to give us some highlights of Twisters and Wenches in general, the campaign with Jugs?
I suppose I'll tell you a little bit more about Jugs first, which will then fit in with all of this. The whole point is I picked a paladin, so I went for lawful good. So the best Boy Scout there is. Everything was the best of the best of the best, and he didn't like anything that wasn't that. When I built the character, how I build all my characters is I come up with what I refer to as their core. And so for him, it was strength and honor. So what that meant was, even when I first created him, when I hadn't played a session, I knew that anything that was put in front of me, I would have to refer it to strength and honor. So his class was Paladin. His subclass was Oath of Conquest. We fiddled with it a little bit, but in the end it was Oath of Conquest. So it was about being big, strong, you know, aggressive fighter, etc. We came up with a bit of backstory and a bit of lore for his race, and we created more of the warbear to make it legitimate that he exists. And in their society, we leaned on things like the ordning from D&D, and
From the giants,
again,
yeah.
all about strength. Yeah, things like giants and the giant belts of strength and things like that.
So just
So
for
everything that he
on that, actually, just for people in chat who aren't so privy to D&D, because we have a lot of people who are joining us for the first time and stuff. The ordning is it's a ranking that the giants use. They have this system called Mog and Mat, like if you're doing a good thing or a bad thing, but also these feats of strength. And when they're competing with each other, like whoever is on top of that list is basically just king of the giants, more or less. Like they just run the giants. So it's like Jugs was built on a similar system, not necessarily inherently through the giants, but just a similar thing of he valued strength. That was his measure of a man, right?
And yeah, exactly. And like in my head as well, when I was younger, I used to be into Warhammer 40k in particular. And I used to play Space Marines, this, that, and the other. But I always liked
that just makes sense. Space Marine, now I get it. That just clicked.
Well, if you mix a Space Marine with the orc mentality of the biggest is the leader, and they fight each other to be the boss, that's sort of what the Warbears were about. Similar to the honor of the Space Marines, but the chaos of the orcs, all about strength and things like that. So that meant that any time he was given a challenge, whether it was even a perceived challenge, whether it was somebody offered him a drink, he would take it as, well, strength and honor, you show strength, so you down it. If they're drinking a pint, you drink a keg, that kind of thing. So everything became about
multiple times. He did
multiple times, multiple times, and he had a belt where he carried kegs on him at one point. So yeah, everything became about strength and honor. So from then on, anything that happened around him, he viewed it through that lens, that he wanted to show his strength or he wanted to prove his honor. So, you know, for him, there was no honor in fighting the little guy. So whenever there was a combat, he wanted the biggest, most armored, baddest guy. He would go to them and ignore the others. Never leave a man behind, that type of stuff.
Get some.
So for me, it made it really easy to understand how to make my choices. Whenever I was presented with anything, I could immediately fall back on those core values, and more or less a semblance of a path was always there for me. And then the more I played the character, the more organic it became, and the more I could lean on a session beforehand or a particular thing or a moment with another character. And then he grew, and his lore grew, and his backstory and who he was, you know, who he became in the end changed. But it was all built in strength and honor. So with that in mind, we had a very mixed party, and we had a chaotic party. So some of my
there's a lot of you, There's 7 people, right?
usually,
I think, consistently, and then we would bring 1 or 2 in, like Jamie and stuff would join us every so often. So it was like there was like
between 7
and
9.
8, 7 or 8 or 9.
The odd time, exactly. So like, I mean, one of my key moments was a big learning when I tried to protect other players without communicating that, and in the end left myself vulnerable, and then decided to do some tanking when I should have done some disengaging, then realized 2 or 3 turns too late, then tried to disengage, and then I was too late. I was overwhelmed, and then I had my first character death. But
That's
obviously
right. I think we touched on that in Rory's interview, actually. But that was so
I'll leave the detail of that if it's in Rory's interview, because I haven't actually seen that one yet.
I don't remember if he talked about his very specific moment, but if not, I will need to bring that up in a future one with Rory, because it's very funny.
For anyone who doesn't know, he cut my character's heart out of love.
Out of love,
I tell you, out of love. And there was a lot of back and forth and thievery, etc., to get the heart back, put it back in my body, and revivify, and this, that, and the other. So I mean, for me,
it came out of a place of like, we can resurrect him with a piece of him, because you were all new to D&D, so you're like, well, surely that's how this works. And so Roy just took the heart. It was great.
And like for me, that was a huge moment, because my character died, and I had to sit there for like, I don't know, a session or a session and a half or whatever it was, quietly watching everyone else play and seething, and then thinking over all my actions and what I woulda, coulda, shoulda. So that was a huge learning moment for me. It was also great to see the party dynamics and see them rally around my character and do everything they could to bring him back, which for me meant they liked him and they wanted him to stay, as opposed to me re-roll somebody else. So that was cool. That was a novelty. And obviously I learned a lot about the mechanics and knowing your sheets and knowing all the things your character can do, and I just got so used to, if you see it, hit it, that I wasn't primed to retreat or disengage, because it wasn't in his way. and I should have done something more tactical. And then from then on, my character started to become more and more tactical, less reactionary, less instinctual.
He did
and
yell a
started to become
door
smarter.
open, to be fair, so less reaction. Like I see what you're saying, but there was still that hint and that flavor.
Yeah, I love that. There was a door we were trying to open as a party, and rogues tried to lockpick it. People tried all sorts of
Not
different
once
things,
left
and
and right
everything
though.
failed.
Like everybody
Yeah.
was rolling terrible. Like,
Yeah, so nothing worked. And then for flavor at the time, I had an ability called Daunting Roar, which is supposed to be about, debuffing opponents. So it has no effect on a door. But I opted to roll it into chat, do a Daunting Roar, because my character was just really frustrated and furious,
Yeah.
and just went for a athletics check against the door, and in the end was able to rip it off the hinges. That was amazing. And then that became a thing, that my character became the door opener. So I started to get tools, things like battering rams, and that was one of my things that I did. I kept the doors open for everybody later on, because doors will get you. Yeah. So I mean, those moments were huge. I have so many moments with each and every member of our party, but I don't want to talk about them because they're their moments, and I'm sure we'll have other interviews. And as I say, I haven't seen everybody, so I've seen some of the groups, but I have to catch up on them because I recently got married, so I've been a bit busy and I haven't had the time.
Absolutely.
But I will have time in the near future to catch back up on all of that good stuff.
On youtube.com/Flying Orc.
We could talk for the next 6 hours if I was just to talk about interactions within the party, because there's huge ones. But for me, I think
you could
the
even end
death
the
was a big one.
there. Like we could talk for 6 hours because we just love this shit. We're passionate about it, so that's what it is. Sorry, I cut you off.
I mean, technically we do every week on a Wednesday.
Twitch.tv/Flying Orc. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, key moments. I think that the death was a really big one, because it I learned more about the game in that moment. I learned more about myself, and then I also learned about the interactions with the party, how meaningful they were, and also how much they cared about me. So for that, all of that just took so much from that, and I amended my play style, and my RP started to come back because I bonded with the players. And one of the things I mentioned was I was brought into the game by Cian. So if you haven't worked that out, that means I didn't know everybody else who was playing.
Yeah,
so I came into it not being friends with everyone beforehand, so everyone was strangers to me, and now I just count everybody as really good friends. So that was amazing, and part of that death and rebirth was part of that in real life bonding as much as it was in the game. So for me, it was huge moment.
If I don't ask the question, if I don't talk about it, I will get yelled at. So of course I need to hear the story of the infamous Juggernaut prank, the one that like lives through history of the game. Like that should be in the annals of history for D&D. It's like crazy.
So the whole thing is that Juggernaut only does good things, or he tries to only let good things happen in his company. So he actively tries to stop anything that he deems to be bad, unfair, dishonorable, whatever it is around him. And one of the things he did is he used to mark his skin and his armor of all his accomplishments and achievements. So anytime he showed honor, if it was enough, he put it on his gear. So he was really into that. Now, other people in the party had different approaches. Lots of different people did different things, but Thiago in particular, so Cian's character at the time, was very chaotic, doesn't even cut it. Let's just say that Slate has taken a page from Thiago's book, so if you're watching the current campaign, kind of some of the stuff I'm doing gives you a bit of flavor for just what comes out of left field. That was kind of what we were dealing with. You think you're going to go left, you go right, and up is down, and so on. So Thiago used to find himself, and then ourselves as a result would find ourselves in trouble because of his actions, both story-wise, mechanically-wise, all sorts of stuff. And it used to happen on the regular. So in the beginning we started, berating Thiago in roleplay, then we started berating Cian in jest, and then it became a thing, and we all really enjoyed it. But there was times where it would have been a lot easier if we'd done something else. So Juggernaut was getting frustrated with his antics and frustrated with the delays and some of the, I'll say, the naughty stuff he was doing. So Juggernaut decided to do something.
Illegal things he was doing. Like there were some really over the line things he did. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Wasting a wish, that was one, but that'll come later. I'll come back to that.
Oh, wow.
But basically, Juggernaut decided to play a very extreme prank, which, depending on the lens you look at, you could view it as not honorable. The reason he did it was to teach Thiago a lesson. So what I did was, Thiago mentions in his interview, Cian mentioned that Thiago did a love potion between two people in the party.
Yeah.
And after the session was over, we were all talking about it, and people were all saying, oh, we're going to get him, we're going to do something. So I turned to everybody there. Cian had logged off, and I said to everybody who was in the room in the Discord, I said, don't worry about it, I'll get him, don't talk about it again, I have a plan. And everybody kind of went, yeah, and then forgot about it. So I set about a plan that took several months to come to fruition. The first thing I did was I researched on the internet rabies, basically. And rabies, yeah, well, you'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. When you look into rabies, the characteristics between it is things like light sensitivity, being pale, sickly, having an aversion to water. Now, if you start to line these up, they also go hand in hand with stories about vampirism. So vampires also holy water, sunlight, pale, so on and so forth. So when you Google rabies, you will see that there's a huge crossover where, depending on the lens you look at it, one could be seen as the other. So I thought, wouldn't it be funny to give Thiago rabies and make him think he was turning into a vampire when he wasn't? So that was the start of it. So what I did in the game was I reached out to Ken behind the scenes, and I paid money in the game to
It was a lot. It was like 800 gold, right? Like, it was a lot.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge money. So that there was a lot of turn of events, but the first one was to create a book. So I created a book that talked about new strands of vampirism, talked about how it displayed itself, how it was like incurable, really awful, this kind of thing. But it mentioned in it, let's say, like an AA 10-step program that you can cure yourself. But if you have the new strain, you can only do this 10 steps. So if you do anything else that's in the known world, any other cure won't work if it's for this strain. So I invented a strain and invented a cure. So I had that set up in the game. My background was that I was a knight, so I had squires. So I used my squires to get the book in front of the party. Someone else in the party actually found the book.
It was total coincidence, because you had mentioned it, we talked about the book, and it wasn't a week later that they were talking about vampires. And I don't know why, because they have this, we have this thing in our campaign that's called Campfire. So there's a conversation that goes in there. I can't see it as a DM. The DMs can't see Campfire because it's a place for the party to talk and to strategize and to think, and that's fine. And so we have this space for them, and then clearly they were talking, because I got a message halfway, it was like halfway formed. I think it was Rory even messaged me, and he was like, oh, we're looking into vampires. Do you have any, like, is there anything we can do in game that about books? And I was like, well, it just so happens we do have books. You may have it in your own library back in the manor where you guys are, so go check it out. And so I think it was himself and Kyle maybe, or someone had just gone.
Yeah, and in our game we had a warlock and a patron and loads of things that tied into that kind of macabre horror, that direction for some people in the party. So the setup was there, and it was early, so somebody got the book and then they sat on it for like a ton of sessions, like 6-7 sessions, 4 or 5 hours each. And then down the road, what I did was, again, with all the gold that I laid out with Ken for my expenses, let's say the book was 100 gold or something, I said I wanted to hire the equivalent of an escort in D&D. Yes. I wanted them to be like a high-class escort. I wanted them to be something that I thought Thiago's character would like, so a druid, attractive, all this kind of stuff. And what I wanted to do is go to them and tell them my plan was for them to consent to contracting rabies and giving rabies to Thiago, making him think that they're a vampire. My character was a paladin, so I can't be affected by disease, but I can also heal and cure that kind of thing. So the deal was, with the escort, it would be a temporary thing. I would heal them afterwards. They get paid a whole pile of like danger money, etc., for what they go through. They consent to it. They know about it. And the deal was also that they would only do it if Thiago pursued them. So that was one of the caveats.
Already, so by the way, we're in weeks of sessions since Richard has been like, I'm planning something, don't worry about it. We're stretching out. Like, this isn't all one day.
This is
like later. Way later. We're still working on this, yeah.
Yeah.
I say you're still working on this and telling me what you want, and I'm like, okay, he's gonna get mad at me,
Yes,
but here we go.
what we did in the game is we did downtime. So, for example, the book had to take time to be written and be made and be bound. So while that happened behind the scenes, I couldn't do anything in the game until the book was finished. Then when the book was finished, I had to find an escort. That took downtime behind the scenes, took several episodes, etc., etc. So when we got the escort, had them prepped, we had them in particular locations. They had a set list of locations to go through at certain times, and a couple of times we tried to set them up, but the meeting didn't work out. Ultimately,
for some reason, you guys got hyper focused too. You guys were waiting for like a tavern episode, and every session before that had some sort of tavern moment. And then it's like the world just aligned from there, and you guys were like, you know what? I think we're gonna take this campaign really seriously, and you just fucking bombed through the story. And then just stopped doing tavern shit. So we had to wait for like weeks and weeks and weeks. So it was like
100%.
every so often Richard was like, hey, by the way, we need a tavern. And I'm like, where? When can we do this? Like, you guys are like driving this train.
So I was waiting for the hammer to drop for ages. And my character was known for, like I said, challenges, drinking, pit fighting, this type of stuff. So then I just started really pushing that he needed a drink all the time, and then we should go to a tavern and so on and so forth. And eventually we went anyway, and we had a casual session of people drinking and dancing and music and all the things that do. And so this escort was sitting in the corner, and off his own bat, there was a conversation started, and Tiago thought about it, got interested, had a chat, and then decided, actually, no, I'm not that person anymore. I'm going to leave it. So he backed off, conversation ended, and then somebody else in the group, Rory, basically nudged Cian and was like, what are you doing? Go on, etc., etc. And then he changed his mind, and long story short, we did a whole fade to black scene where he went home with her or whatever. The next day he woke up, she was told to bite him, so he woke up with bite marks and rabies. And then obviously somebody else in the party had the book. Then 2 and 2 went together. They started talking about that, and it happened to coincide. I think there was like some kind of full moon or something, like 2 or 3 days later.
Yeah, it was really.
And in the book, I had happened to write something about it had to be done on a full moon. Part of the 10-step program was part of the cure had to be a full moon. So all of a sudden, the party got very invested, and they looked at the steps. So in the steps, they had to collect a whole pile of random stuff like, chicken bones, a feathered quill, a this, a that, whatever have you. All items, by the way, that were cheap, cheerful, and my characters already had, but we pretended they were expensive. So beside each one, I listed a gold amount. So let's say it was the quill was, 1 copper in a shop. I listed it as like 20 gold. So then Cian's character, Tiago, gave the money to my squires to go shopping and buy all the stuff. So they just gave me all the money back. So he paid for his own prank. Yeah, he paid for his own prank. And I also built in a profit margin, so I made money on the prank as well.
Now, before we
several hundred gold.
Before we push on there, as a DM, and as some DMs out there might know, we have rules for diseases and we have rules for different things, but didn't have a rule for rabies. But hey, look, it just so happens I have 3.5's best fucking book, the Book of All Darkness. Oh, in there we have some sick diseases and stuff. Perfect, let's have a look. And so rabies, lo and behold, is one of the, I think it was in Book of All Darkness, the rabies is in there. And it's like, oh yeah, but you roll a d10 and that's how sick you are. And at the end of that time, if you haven't gotten it cured by like a paladin or a cleric, oh, you die. That's a thing. And I was like, well, I can't tell Richard this because we're doing this all in game, but here's the thing. So Cian, go ahead, roll a d10 for me. No big deal. He rolls the d10. Of course, it's a 1. So he has 24 hours left to live. So he's getting super fucking sick, super fast. So the prank goes from like prank mode to like high escalation. Oh shit. And you're still like moving that train, but it's like, wow.
And he also got a permanent stat decrease as a result of that nat 1 on the disease thing. So I mean, I was delighted with that added bonus. Extra bang for your buck. I didn't even pay for that. And then there was a list of things you had to collect. So again, just a way for me to get money. Think Space Jam when they take the water that makes them all amazing players. And it's just water. It's the same thing. We just got like dirt, chicken bones, crap, put it in a thing and said, here, drink this. The next phase was he had to bathe naked in a fountain in front of a church.
Right.
In the game, there was this huge area in the center of a massive town where they had a huge church, and in front of it was a massive fountain. So just think like the central area of an entire place where thousands of people are. So I basically made him get naked in front of everybody just for the hell of it. And my character obviously went to help him and helped him cut his clothes off and things like that, because I'm just a good friend.
You're a good friend like that, yeah. So you got him naked
100%.
in a town square in the evening when it was pretty busy, and like started like throwing him into a fountain, and he's like Mr. Burns weak at this point, like he can't do shit. he's really so struggling.
Exactly. And then I think to finish it off, some of the other people in the party were trying to help him. They tried to do things like extract his blood to get a vial, to get a cure or whatever, or also to see if they could create a vampire later on. Luckily they rolled super well, and there was a whole pile of tests they had to do, because unbeknownst to them, any one of them could have got rabies. But because I can't be diseased as a paladin,
Yeah,
I can do what I like, so I was safe.
One of the highlights, by the way, wasn't even that you brought this list up. It was like Rory and Con stuff that had been looking at this book previously.
Yeah.
They were the people who were like, oh, we have this book about curing vampirism. Oh my god, why didn't we think of this? Like they thought of it at the beginning of the session, and they pulled the book out.
Yeah, I didn't.
And
I
they
didn't
are
bring
going
it up,
through the list.
exactly.
You didn't even bring it up. They brought it up.
But that was the whole point of planting the book early on, that it would be organic, and the best con is if they think that it's their idea. And then the last step was he had to be to sleep in an open grave in a graveyard, and we had scheduled it that it was like the
With
next
a closed
day.
coffin. It has to be for the vampire, like has to be closed coffin, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was supposed to be scheduled like that the next day. It'd be like morning prayer or whatever. So when he got out naked after being in the fountain, all the worshippers were there, and it was really embarrassing, etc. Yeah, that was the gist of it. And my favorite two things about this is, one, he paid for all of it, and he paid something like 800 or 900 gold. And let's say it cost me 600 gold, so I made 200 or 300 on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I absolutely love that he paid for it, and I made profit. The second thing that I absolutely loved about it is it all hinged on him fucking around, because we used to joke about fuck around and find out, and we kept saying to him, stop fucking around, and he'd be like, well, then I won't find out. And he was saying, my character arc, I'm turning into a better man, I'm going to stop. So when he was presented with this opportunity with the girl, had he have followed his own rules and his own progression and left her alone, none of it would have happened, which means he did it to himself. I set it up, but he went for it. So for me, for Jugs, for example, that was his whole thing.
Because nobody knew what you were doing, but they were all encouraging him to do all of these bad things because they do.
Yeah. But that was amazing that nobody else in the party knew about it.
My favorite part was that, and I don't even know if we ever discussed this or explained it to them, but what actually cured it was, you were like, my friend, I'm going to say a prayer for you so that hopefully this rest works for you. And you place your hands on him, and you use your 5 points of lay on hands to cure a disease, and you cast lay on hands and take away the rabies, and then you're like, you've got this, friend, just one night underground and you'll be okay. It's so fucking good.
Yeah, it was brilliant. So I'd written into it that basically they had to go to a cleric or a paladin that was part of the steps, and obviously I'm a paladin in the party, so it was all set up.
What luck.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great. And then the best part of it is I didn't tell anybody afterwards. So I waited again weeks and weeks and weeks, and we were coming to the close of our campaign.
They thought it was vampirism. The whole party thought that was vampirism. Nobody except you and I knew. Yeah.
And I waited weeks and weeks, and we had a moment, not quite at the end of the campaign, but quite far into it.
Yeah,
heading towards the end,
yeah,
where all of our characters were traveling some distance, and we were in a mode of transport together, and we, in a wagon or whatever, and we were all talking, and different people in the party decided to share like truths and secrets and open up to each other. So then Jugs, being honorable, went, oh well, speaking of which, basically I sorry Tiago, but you did it to yourself, and then outed it, told everybody. So that was amazing, and to see everybody's faces and the reaction, and to get everyone's feedback on it was amazing. And it was brilliant, but it took months, like in real life months, to pull off, but it was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, it took a really long time, because like if you think about our story here, it took 10 minutes to tell, but realistically that was like, Richard planned that for a long time, came back and forth with me quite a bit. We had to get all the stars to align, and then my favorite part was that basically they did. Like, they came and they asked for the book. Asked for the book. Oh, perfect. And it was like a week or two later. It wasn't like a long time later. It was like a week or two later, they came looking for vampire books because something in the campaign, like that was unrelated to this, that they were thinking about, had triggered it. And so they went looking for the books. They were doing their own thing. They brought it all to his attention. He got bit. He was like, oh my God, this has to be vampirism. He was getting pale and sickly. He rolled the 1, so suddenly there's time pressure on it, and he gets like really weak and crippled super quick. And then you're just like watching the whole time as everybody else plays out your plan. Like, that is meticulous.
And then my comment earlier about him wasting a wish. Any of you know about D&D know how powerful a wish is, and you can reshape the universe with it. Thiago got a wish thereafter and used it to cure basically his stat loss. So he was selfish and could have saved the world or stopped cancer or all the orphans or world hunger, and he just chose to make himself feel a bit healthier because he's a prick.
I love it because I gave him the opportunity of the wish as a thank you for some stuff that he had done in the game, and I just said. And it was the 1 week that Luke wasn't there, and I was like, you know what? You can have a wish to fix this. That's fine. Like, you can do what you want with the wish. Whatever you ask for is fine. You have earned it. And I got a message from Luke. He's like, you gave him a wish? Are you stupid? Like, what the hell? And I was like, chaotic. Let's go. And so he was like, Kian was like back and forth on what do I use the wish for? And he was like, I just don't want to fuck over the DM. That's my one goal. Like, I don't want to fuck over the DM. I was like, you do what you want to do, man. If you want to take it, you go for it. The rest of the party is stone quiet. Nobody's talking. And he's like, well, I guess I wish for my con to return to normal so that I'm not so low HP, that everything is back the way it should be. And like Adam, one of our players, interrupts and he goes, I just want you to know now that you've made this decision, I didn't want to metagame, but I have on a piece of paper that you were just going to use this to fix the thing instead of give yourself better con, help the party, give us the gold, defeat the boss, do any of the things that we need to do. Just that. And he holds up the note and it's just like Kian will waste his wish. I love that so much. So you got him with like a double whammy.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, it's just the perfect storm. Everything just fell into place perfectly. Like, it was brilliant.
Keeps on giving.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh man.
So
chat's
thoroughly enjoyed
about this as well. I need to come back to that in a sec. But on that note, go ahead.
This is why I say to people, as in terms of slate, etc., expect a long con.
Expect it, absolutely. But speaking
anything could be happening. Anything.
That's it, exactly. But speaking of Mr. Slate, that brings us into how did you approach and get into the Wandering Isles? How did that become a thing?
So much like everybody else, we were playing together. I got used to D&D, everything that I explained already. I played a whole pile of one-shots. I started doing a small bit of DMing. Yeah. Did a bit of a few in-person games, things like that. And when the opportunity to apply for it and send an application and build a character blind and send it in, so we were told very little about the campaign or about the world. We were asked, to write a letter to explain why we want to be in it, what we think is important, why we're the right choice, all these types of things. But we also needed to create a character, not knowing anything about the world, and flesh them out and build them and submit them as these are who we would play as. So I went about the same thing I did with Jugs. I started with a shell. I started a backstory that's a sandbox, so I'm not into creating a backstory that's like a novel that I give to the DM.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's bullet points. It's a few small things, and it's like video games, fog of war. So the whole point is I don't know my own backstory. I know elements of it. I might know a particular person for a particular reason or a particular place. And I create lots of motivations, things that my character likes and dislikes, and I put these threads there that then Ken can go and turn them into, mutant, crazy alien worms on acid threads and give them back to me later on. Yeah, so I never truly know what's happening. Even if I think I do, I don't. And I love that because I don't want to metagame and I want to be surprised and I want to, not be like a movie you've seen 100 times when as they're talking you're mouthing the words. I don't want to do that, so that's how I like to build my characters. So Slate is exactly the same. It's very much a sandbox character. We know now that he's a changeling. We know now that he's also a bard. Two things I've never played. So in all of my one-shots, all of my games, all of my experience, I always try to play a new character, something that has, no matter what, there's something in it that I've never encountered. So that way it's fresh for me. Yeah. So I am experiencing Bard, Changeling, and Slate a little bit before you guys, but not much. I'm only a little bit ahead of you guys on the journey of figuring out.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm only a few pages ahead, so I'm learning as I go. I'm figuring out as I go. And I said to everybody before we started the campaign, after I was accepted and after we put our characters together and, you know, kind of got a small look at who we might have with some basics, we all agreed that, you know, nobody shared backstory or anything, but just basics of like a class or what they might look like. That was it. So, you know, I have created a very experimental character. I can't use any better word than experimental, because like I said, I've never used any of the stuff that I'm using, and even in terms of how I chose my background, my toolkit, and how I've used my toolkit, so everything is coming from an experimental standpoint, from a different lens, like I said with Juggernaut. And I'm using that lens to use Slate. And as we play the campaign more, you're going to learn more about the lens, what's in it, how he sees things. And then if you were to look back, a lot of the decisions and the choices and the things that he has or hasn't done will all make sense in the future.
And so, I mean, in that vein, without spoilers or anything, but can you actually describe Slate a little bit and what you most enjoy playing him, even comparatively to, say, Jugs or something? He's so different.
Yeah, like... for Jugs, my favorite line is, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So even though I was a paladin, I didn't use magic very often. I very rarely used smite. I very rarely used healing, anything. So I played him as a barbarian, even though he was a paladin, and as you know, with those abilities. So I did use spells from time to time, but very little. Yeah. So everything he did became about athletics. It became ripping doors off, threatening to pull people's arms off, being the heavy hitter, the intimidation, that kind of thing, which I absolutely love and I would do in a heartbeat. I could easily play a barbarian or something and I would love it every minute. But I just decided to mix it up and play something entirely different. And yeah, like I said, I'm enjoying the versatility of who I've played as, because you've seen me so far in the couple of episodes we played, being able to switch it up and do different things in different moments. That's why I chose the Changeling, because I want to challenge myself, you know, to be more flexible, to do more improv, more role play, to be more versatile as a player and a character. So I'm very much in the spotlight. And it's something that I am the player is learning to do. So being, you know, you talk about the party role of being the face, and obviously that's something that Kian and Dash is also doing. So we have two different ways of doing something similar. And that's going to be really interesting. So it's definitely a work in progress. It's definitely a watch this space, because I don't want to say too much. So watch this space is probably the best way to put it. But I'm really enjoying the versatility of not everything being the hammer and nail scenario. I'm having options. I'm being able to think. And I just have to make sure before I talk, before I do or say anything, that I think about that lens and I put everything through that lens.
Absolutely. I mean, that's good advice. But with that, in a few moments, we're going to be jumping into some community questions, because we've got quite a few today. So I would ask, just, you know, given your experience, you've run a whole campaign before. This is your second major campaign that you're playing. You've run your own campaigns as well. How is the experience different for you when you took a look sort of behind that curtain of being a DM yourself for the first time, compared to, you know, sort of being a part of the crew as such instead?
What's weird for me is they're both in parallel and contrast at the same time. So the role of the player, you can argue, is within a box and it's within a frame, and you can do whatever it is within that. And the DM has a much bigger frame, a much bigger toolkit, much more options. So in some ways they're, you know, stark contrast, but they're both the same in terms of creativity. You can make your character what you want. You can make your world what you want, and you can breathe life into them in the way that nobody else could. Even if you gave them that character on paper, someone else would play the same character with all of the information that you gave them differently than you would. So that I love. There's some organicness to it. So for me, that's super. And again, that ties into the sandbox backstory, so that there is a lot of organic living, breathing, growing of the character. So but that's the same as a DM. When you build your world, or you create particular story points. You're not creating a full story from beginning to end. You're creating a couple of points where the characters navigate them. And again, that makes it an organic, living, breathing thing. So they have that in common.
Right.
Obviously, prep is a little different. How you execute what you do is a little different, but I love both, and I would do either all day long. I'm all about D&D. I'm game for anything. I absolutely love DMing. The little bit I've done of it, thoroughly enjoying it, and I just love playing as well. So best of both, having experienced both. I definitely think for me, being a player first helped me to learn more about DMing and understand it more. I think it's a bigger hurdle to start as a DM, so I definitely recommend people to play first, get some experience, learn what you like and don't like, and have your nat 1s and nat 20s as a player and as a character as such, and that will help you shape some of the decisions you make, because you'll see things happen that you go, oh, I would have done that differently, or this or that, and it's all about learning and experience, all about having fun and growing. So
heck yeah, I mean, absolutely, well said. Do you have like one piece of advice you'd give yourself, like starting all over again today? Is there something you'd give yourself as a piece of advice coming in fresh? You mentioned that when you came in as Jugs, you didn't know anyone at the table. You know, you went through it completely clean. It was a very, like, you had to come in, figure all of this out. Anything you take back with you?
I mean, there's two ways to look at this. If I was to go back with what I know now, I would tell the party I'm from the future and kill Tiago. That's obvious.
100%. Yeah. Save yourself a lot of pain.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
So if that wasn't the option, I think, like I mentioned, what was really pivotal for me was that death, and I mentioned all the different reasons and facets to it, and how much I grew and learned and appreciated from that moment. So what I would say is, as a player, there's as much to be had from making a mistake, inverted commas, like your nat 1s or your nat 20s. It doesn't matter what you do, it's the participation, because in every action and reaction, you're going to have feelings, learnings, different things, and they're going to make you settle into the game, into your character, into the world. So I think I would just say don't be afraid to get involved or dip your toe in sooner. So rather than joining a group and letting them take the wheel, and for you just staying quiet and waiting for people to prompt you, if you feel like saying something, say it. It doesn't matter if it's stupid. It doesn't matter if you think it's a bad idea. That's what makes the story amazing. Look at the story of Tiago. It was all bad ideas and stupid things, and it was amazing. So, you know, and every one of us in the party had our moments of dumb things, stupid things, bad things, and it's what made the story rich, vibrant, and it made the lows low and the highs high. So I would say, I would just tell myself to relax and enjoy it. Don't worry about making a mistake. Don't worry about being the new guy. Don't worry about saying something dumb. Don't worry about knowing everything. You don't need to. Take it one step at a time. Enjoy the story. Let it unfold. And what you don't know is part of the story unfolding, and that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's perfect advice. Absolutely. I'll jump to community questions there, because we have a few, like 5 or 6 at the moment. And if you have any questions, please !ask in chat and send them our way. Rhino said that as Richard loves games, shall I bring my Descent box set to the next games meeting?
I saw that in chat, and I did think about just running into the next room and bringing in a big box of Descent that I have, and some of the expansions that I have. I have the older version, not the newer one that was only released recently. So I have Descent, and I have several of the editions. So I would love that. Yes. I
know he's currently playing in the EC games at the moment, so with Emerald Collective at the moment, but he'll definitely see this later, and he'll be super excited. Kian asked, what class would you like to try next?
I mean, when I did my application for this campaign, I initially submitted a rogue. What you know now is there's several rogues in the party, so for that reason I deferred to Bard. So I was leaning towards rogue, but I think rogue, ranger, something like that, but with my own slant on them.
Yeah. And what about the mechanics of D&D was most surprising to you? That came up from Kian as well while you were talking about that at the beginning.
When you say surprising, like one that I found most confusing, or the one that, you know, I thought I knew and then I looked more into it? Like, what do you mean by surprising?
Well, Cian, you can tell us in chat what you mean by most surprising, and I'll move on to the next question and come back. Can we relive Jug's last battle? Does Ken know the long game on that one? I need to know what the fuck that's about.
So, the long game, I'm not 100% sure what he was thinking. So I'm not sure on that one. For everyone who doesn't know, I had my own alter ego, another warbear, etc. And we used to butt heads. He was the BBG for my character, and we had lots of evil deeds, cannibalism, murder, all sorts of crazy stuff being perpetrated by him, because he was the opposite, like dishonorable, hurting children, killing things, killing everything for no reason. Awful character. Everybody hated him, want to kill him.
He was like
Joffrey, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you gave me instructions with him. You were like, I don't care how you play him, just make sure everybody hates him, and I did.
Yep, 100%. And so we had this back and forth where we bumped into each other at several points throughout the campaign. A couple of scuffles, some kidnappings, murders, all these different things.
As you do.
And the long story short, we had a one-on-one towards the very, very, very end of the campaign, and no one knew how it was going to go. And again, we were worried about people dying and this, that, and the other. There was a lot at stake, a lot happening, huge big battle, etc. A lot of people's lives were at stake. But in the early game, my character had collected some blue mushrooms from a cave that other warbears had ingested through no fault of their own, which turned them into basically cocaine bears. They took more damage, they gave more damage, they were insane, they were really powerful, they were super scary. My character, being a warbear, pocketed some of that stuff, didn't say anything to anyone, waited until the very end of the game. Just before my one-on-one fight, my character took that, got the buffs from it, and then I used all of my smites, all of my slots, all of my everything that I could on my first turn. Everything, I just stacked it all up in a way that I'd never done throughout the game, and I ended up basically killing my BBG there and then, immediately.
It was over 100 points of damage amazing. Or something, right? Because you hit a mat and stuff like that, and it all, you basically went crazy with it,
Yeah, it was something like 110 or 115 points of damage in one turn.
It was the record turn damage for that campaign at the time. We put it in our notes somewhere at the time, that it was the record, That was crazy.
Yeah, and it was cool because, again, nobody could have foreseen that happening. Nobody could have anticipated it. Who knows what way the rolls were going to go. And it was over in seconds. But actually, it felt amazing because they had this rivalry, whereas who's better, who's better, who's better? He's dead, I'm better. So for me, it was really satisfying. It was awesome. It was like that roaring at the door and ripping it off the hinges. It was kind of like that. It was super cool. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
Now, the next question comes with points. The question comes from Mandela, and it says, how did the animosity with Thiago start? And now Cian is in there shooting shit, saying that it's just because he beat you at arm wrestling. So I want to just get the full real story.
Yeah, so as you know, my character was all about strength and showing off and trying to outdrink everybody, outfight everybody, be the strongest, biggest, baddest. So Thiago went and bought a potion of giant strength and consumed it at the bar, and then challenged me to an arm wrestle, and his character wasn't built for athletics and my character was, and all of a sudden he beat me in the first round, and obviously the roll was insane. Then, knowing something was up, but pride was at stake, we were going for best out of three. So my character won the second one against all odds. And then on the third one, he pipped me. So my character lost and was disgraced, upset, beaten by this, lanky streak of piss, basically. And he was this rippling, muscled warbear. So it was very demoralizing and upsetting. And definitely was one of the things, but there was also moments in the campaign where he fell asleep and people stacked things on his head and did little things. So then became moments where, for example, Juggernaut went to lift Thiago out of a vat of acid, and as he took his hand away, and Thiago fell into the water, fell back into the acid rather, and he said to him along the lines of, now stop the crap that you're doing, kind of thing, that's your punishment. And then that became like a tit for tat that eventually went to the long con with the rabies that we all heard about. So it started early, but it definitely escalated quickly from public embarrassment to jugs.
Thiago definitely has a history of using potions to trick people and manipulate people and stuff like that he would do behind the scenes. And he would message me, whisper me, he's like, can I do a stealth roll to just like a hand check or something, just see if I can down this potion? Or like he would go, oh, I'm gonna go into this room. He'd whisper me, he's like, I'm going into this room. I'm just taking the hill giant strength. I was like, cool, add it to your modifiers, go ahead. And then he would go in and he would like do all of this stuff. But like there's a ton of stuff you guys did to each other that was back and forth. And like I would be asked by like a player, like, why is he picking on me? Why is the DM picking on me? I'm like, I can't talk about this. But like it looks like it's me because you guys are fucking around. So it's just that's just the way it is. Yeah, that's Kian, I guess, all over. One of the questions here, last question really, is just because you were talking about your impressive board game collection, do you have any gem or jewel or even a recommendation for people? Like, what is your favorite like board game?
Yeah, I mean, I have loads because, like I talked about getting into D&D and talking about the whole food is like music, you can't eat the same thing every day type, all of that same thing. So I have a lot of different types of board games, same in a lot of different types of video games. So I have something for everybody. I've got party games for large groups, I've got co-op games, deception games, you know, campaign games, once off, short games. I got a bit of everything. For me, one of my standout favorites, which in the board game community is a standout favorite for a lot of people, it's won a ton of awards, is a game called Nemesis.
Yeah, you talked to me about that before, actually.
Yeah, it's similar to the franchise Aliens, the similar kind of IP. It's a lot of people who wake up on a ship after being in hypersleep and their memory is foggy from hypersleep. You create the ship using tiles, which means every time you play, the ship is in a different order. So again, your brain is foggy, so you can't remember where the different rooms are in the ship. Full of aliens. It's really hard. What I love about it is it can be played. Rory's
interest with that, by the way. Like he's the space guy.
Yeah, you can be played full co-op, so you can play together against the ship and against the aliens and whatever have you. But the best way to play it is everybody gets secret objectives, and one or more of the players, up to 5 players or so, could be with you or against you. And the way it works is you get given several cards with objectives, and some of them have personal and different objectives for and against the team. It could be like kill player 1, and you know everyone has a little bracket in front of them where they hold their cards, and it'll say player 1, player 2, player 3. It'll say things like, you know, kill the queen, capture the egg, crash the ship, bring the ship back to Earth, bring an egg back, whatever it is. And basically once the first alien appears and the shit hits the fan, everybody has to discard all of their objective cards but one. And then from then on, you're locked in. So you could get locked into one that has 2 choices or one that's just a specific thing. So if the first room you find is the infirmary and something you have is to do with the infirmary or whatever have you. So it leads to a lot of, okay, let's fight the aliens. We'll go together into this room, and you go in and then the player opens the airlock or like lets the alien in or runs away. And you're like, what are you doing? And then, so there's a lot of mistrust, take that. And no matter how many times you play it, then it becomes really fun because you just assume that someone is always the evil one. So you're like, it's definitely you, and then the game ends and they're like, it wasn't me, I was on your team the whole time. So it's
kind of
great
Among
fun.
Us vibes, but in a more board game sense, right? Like that kind of
absolutely.
Suspicious.
Yeah, and it has all that, like find weapons, you know, you have to have ammo, there's tents, there's loads of different things, special abilities for the characters, etc., etc. It's really fun, it's really interesting, it's not very difficult to learn. The models and minis and stuff that come with it, and like I said, the fact that it can be co-op, solo, or semi-cooperative where you're together until you're not, or half of you together and some of you are not, gives it a lot of replayability. And the modular tile system as well, and the board has 2 sides and things like that. And there's several expansions, so that would be one I would thoroughly recommend because it ticks a lot of boxes. It's not massively expensive, it's a lot of bang for your buck, you know. That's an amazing game.
Heck yeah, absolutely. We need to actually, what about a question, I suppose, how long does the session take? Is it 14 years like Monopoly?
So it depends. I would say most of these types of games are probably 2 hours. Less.
Nice, yeah.
I mean, like anything, the first time you play it, it's going to take way longer. It's like saying the first time you try and drive a car down to the shop versus the 100th time. You know, when you're learning to do something, it's much slower. So the first time or once or twice you play the game, it'll take 3 hours or 4 hours because you don't know what you're doing. You're looking at the rule book. Everybody's not knowing. But once you know, the game can be quick. It can be 40 minutes, an hour, you know, because you know how to do everything and how to set it up. So it's just practice.
Absolutely. Heck yeah. On that note, we will be wrapping up shortly. Thank you so much for joining us today, Richard. This was dope. I've been waiting for this conversation, especially I wanted to hear the prank tales and stuff like that. That's been on my list for a while. And it like lives in infamy.
I did say when I was playing as Slate that a couple of people are going in the book. Now the book has more meaning when you talk about the long con and who owes Slate something. It makes a lot more sense now for anyone who's watching.
That's it. Absolutely. He
An
remembers.
elephant never forgets.
That's it. We're going to be rating our friends over at we're going to be rating our friends over at Emerald Collective. They are playing at the moment. I believe Ryan is in their game, so we're going to absolutely have to give them a raid. It's going to be it's going to be nice to come back to this at some point. We'll be doing this run of interviews again at some point down the line, and it'll be nice to talk a lot more in depth about Slate when people have really gotten to know him. And I think in a sense, based on what you were saying, when you really get to know him, so it's going to be nice to have a nice in detailed chat about like what has changed. Maybe around like the 50 session mark or something, we can do this again.
100%.
We'll be picking this back up. If you want to see Richard, of course, you can join us in our Discords and stuff. You can also, at any point, watch our videos on YouTube and stuff. He's in all of our Wandering Owls games, and we will be picking it back up on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. GMT +1. We'll be continuing this week, so we can find out what Mr. Slade is up to this week and see what classes he has snuck his way into. Perfect.
That's it.
I'm going to set up the raid there. It's going to take us over to EC. Make sure you show them some love. We have our emotes now and stuff, which is dope. We have our raid emotes, so you guys make sure you spam the raid emotes, and let's see EC see some love. Show Ryan some love, especially because he's always in our games, and he's definitely dedicated. The reason he wasn't here today is because he's there. So go show him some love. You get the best of both worlds. You get us and you get Ryan. There you go. That's how it works. Perfect. Any last minute thoughts? Any notes? Anything you want to say? You done? That's it. We're good.
I'm delighted. Pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to more questions from chat and in the sessions going forward. You know, people building up questions and appearing after the session and hanging out with us and continuing moments like these, but after the session and asking about what was that about? Why'd you do this? I thought you were going to do that. Looking forward 100%. To getting that. And I think who knows? You know, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can just say that I'm, heavily influenced by people who stay in chat. So who knows what I might do in the next session afterwards? I'm just saying.
So he can be bribed. That's
bought.
What he's saying. He's easily bought. Yeah, he can be bribed. It's out there. Perfect. All right, it's going.
Do you deny for a second that Slate appears like someone who could be bribed?
No, I'm positive he got into the situation because he was bribed.
I was just going to say he took money from the guy to go to the school. That's
it. Yeah, he took money to go. 10 seconds, 7 seconds. Give them our loves. Tell them we sent you. We love you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Or great.